In the theater of power, the guilty man is rarely the one who falls. History favors the artful, those who redirect the knife before it reaches their own throat. Today, I will show you how to shift blame so precisely that your enemies destroy each other while your hands remain stainless. The world is a court without justice, only perception. Men are judged not by truth, but by the stories whispered about them in candlelit halls. If you wish to endure, you must master the shadows between guilt and innocence. Blame is a weapon sharper than steel, silent, clean, and devastating in the right hands. It can preserve a throne or send an empire to ruin. And yet, the unwise see it as cowardice, not realizing it is survival itself. In the following moments, I will guide you through this dark craft, not for the weak-hearted, nor the morally fragile, but for those who understand that in power, purity is a luxury and survival is the only virtue. In the theater of power, truth is a luxury and perception is law. You may believe that in conflict, facts will save you. That proof will shield you. But ask yourself, who decides what is a true? It is not the judge who holds the scale. It is the one who whispers to the judge before the trial begins. History has no shortage of examples. Consider Richard III of England, immortalized as a hunchbacked villain who murdered his nephews. Did he commit the crime? We cannot be certain, but his enemies wrote the history, painted his portrait in poison, and made his guilt eternal. The truth became irrelevant. Do you see the pattern? What matters is not what you have done, but what they believe you have done. And beliefs are not born in courts. They are forged in corridors, in back rooms, in the minds of men before they ever see evidence. If you wish to survive in this world, you must become an architect of perception. Ask yourself, how does a spider catch a fly? Not by chasing it openly, but by weaving a web where the prey traps itself. So too with reputation. You do not argue for your innocence, you make the world incapable of imagining your guilt. The novice tries to defend themselves with facts. The master shapes the facts before they exist. Consider the Roman general Scipio Africanus. When accused of corruption, he did not plead or present evidence. Instead, he reminded the people of his victory over Hannibal, the greatest threat Rome had ever faced. He reframed the conversation entirely. He was not a suspect, he was a savior. The charges dissolved, not because they were false, but because they no longer fit the image the crowd held of him. Here lies the first principle: control the story before the story controls you. You must plant the seeds of perception early. A reputation for loyalty, for competence, for honor. Then, when accusation comes, it will feel unnatural, like claiming the sun rises in the west. People will defend you, not out of love, but because to believe otherwise would shatter the order of their world. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance. Once a belief is anchored, the mind resists anything that contradicts it. The wise ruler anchors beliefs in his favor long before they are tested. But anchoring is only half the art. You must also learn the orchestration of doubt. If an enemy gains the upper hand in the war of perception, you do not fight on their chosen ground. You shift the terrain, introduce another possibility, another suspect, another narrative. Even if their facts are solid, uncertainty weakens them. The mob craves certainty. When it is denied, it clings to the most familiar version of events, yours. Consider the Borgia family. They thrived not by proving innocence, but by ensuring that accusations against them were tangled in a forest of intrigue. Every scandal had multiple versions, each pointing in a different direction. In the end, no one could say with confidence what was true, and so power remained where it had always been, in their hands. Now I must warn you, this is not the work of the careless. The manipulation of perception is like holding a blade by its edge. You must be precise, or you will bleed with the rest. There is a danger in overplaying the part. If you are seen trying to control the narrative, you invite suspicion. The trick is to make others think they arrived at the conclusion themselves. You offer hints, fragments, contradictions, until the image they assemble is the one you designed all along. And when the crisis passes, do not relax. A single victory in the war of perception is meaningless unless you maintain the terrain. Your reputation is a fortress. Neglect its walls, and the enemy will return with greater force. The modern world is no different from the courts of Florence or Rome. Your arena may be the workplace, the political stage, or the digital sphere. Accusations fly faster now, but the principles remain ancient. Control the narrative before it controls you. Shape the lens through which you are seen. Never argue the facts when you can dictate the framework in which those facts are interpreted. And remember, truth is fragile, but perception is immortal. In every court, in every army, in every company boardroom, there is always someone who will catch the blame when trouble strikes. The untrained mind thinks this is luck. The strategic mind knows it is design. You must understand. Blame, like water, seeks the path of least resistance. If you shape that path in advance, it will always flow toward the shadow you have chosen. The question is, how do you choose this shadow? First, you must see people not as they present themselves, but as they truly are. Every man carries invisible signs, vanity, greed, insecurity, that make him an easy vessel for suspicion. Some speak too much. Some carry themselves with arrogance. Some have reputations already clouded with minor scandals. It is these flaws you will exploit. Consider the fate of Thomas Cromwell, chief minister to King Henry VI. When the king tired of his latest political marriage, Cromwell became the perfect scapegoat. He was brilliant, feared, and already resented by the nobility. When the axe fell, it fell swiftly, because the court had been prepared to believe his guilt for years. A perfect shadow. You must cultivate such shadows in your own arena, not through open hostility. That would be too crude. Rather, you feed their weaknesses in subtle ways. You praise them in public for qualities that others secretly despise. You encourage them to take on risky tasks that might later soar in the eyes of the crowd. If you are clever, you make them feel indispensable, because those who feel untouchable walk boldly into traps. Psychology calls this the halo effect in reverse. If a person is known for certain flaws, those flaws will color every judgment made about them. In time, even the smallest rumor can bloom into a conviction. But you must work in silence. If your influence is seen, suspicion will turn on you. Think of the Venetian Republic, a master of such games. When a foreign alliance collapsed, the Doge never shouldered the shame. Instead, he allowed whispers to circulate that certain ambassadors had mismanaged the negotiations. These men were not executed, but their careers withered, and the Doge's reputation remained intact. The shadow had done its work. There is also the art of plausible deniability. Never be the one to start the rumor. Instead, let it seem as if it rose naturally from the air. Perhaps from a careless remark at dinner or a conveniently overheard conversation. The greatest manipulator leaves no fingerprints. Ask yourself, who around you draws envy from others? Who holds a position that demands results but guarantees enemies? Who lacks the political intelligence to protect themselves from whispers? These are your candidates. You may think this is cruel, but remember, in the struggle for survival, it is better that the arrow finds another's chest than your own. Still, you must balance the game. A scapegoat too powerful may resist or turn the tables. One too weak may crumble before the plan reaches its height, leaving you exposed. Choose someone visible enough to attract attention, yet isolated enough to lack allies when the crisis comes. The perfect shadow also serves as a warning to others. When they see blame fall upon someone else, they hesitate to challenge you directly. They sense you are untouchable. Not because you are innocent, but because no one can imagine the accusation sticking to you. And here is the final refinement. Sometimes the shadow does not even need to fall. Its very existence protects you. Just as a fortress deters an attack without firing a single arrow, so the presence of a ready scapegoat can shield you from ever facing direct accusation. But never grow complacent. Shadows shift with the light. A scapegoat today could become your ally tomorrow, or your accuser if mishandled. You must tend to them as carefully as you tend to your allies, feeding their pride, letting them believe they are safe. Only when the moment comes do you allow the storm to break upon them. And when it does, you will stand unmarked in the clearing sky, while others speak of your wisdom, your foresight, your innocence. The world will not see your hand in the matter. They will only see that, once again, disaster passed you by. A blade in the wrong moment is a blade wasted. The same is true of blame. The art of shifting guilt is not simply about where it lands, but when. Strike too soon, and you appear desperate, revealing your fear. Strike too late, and the tide of suspicion will have already turned against you. Timing is not chance. It is calculation. Think of Julius Caesar. When accusations arose against certain senators for conspiring against Rome's interests, he did not rush to expose them. He allowed the whispers to grow, allowed them to believe they were safe. Only when their arrogance was ripe, when the people were ready to accept the story, did he act. His timing gave the purge an air of inevitability, not cruelty. Ask yourself, when is your enemy weakest? Not when they are attacked, but when they feel untouchable. The novice strikes at the first sign of trouble. The master waits until the moment when all roads of suspicion naturally lead away from himself and toward the chosen shadow. It is then, only then, that the accusation falls like thunder. Psychology calls this priming. You prepare the environment so the mind is already leaning toward the conclusion you want. Then, when you deliver the final blow, it feels like the truth was always obvious. The danger in haste is that people still remember your proximity to the problem. Their emotions are fresh, their memories sharp. If you shift blame too soon, it looks like evasion, not revelation. Consider the fall of Cardinal Wolsey, advisor to Henry VT. When his political enemies moved against him, they did not accuse him at the peak of his influence. They waited until he failed to secure the king's annulment from Catherine of Aragon. When the people's patience had already turned to resentment, the blow landed precisely when his power had waned, but his visibility remained high enough to absorb the outrage. Do you see the pattern? The moment of maximum vulnerability is not born from the size of the mistake, but from the mood of the crowd. You must read the currents. Observe the fatigue of allies, the whispers of rivals, the shifting loyalties in the room. Blame shifting is not the work of a swordsman. It is the work of a hunter, stalking until the prey steps into the open. There are also times when you must delay not to protect yourself, but to amplify the impact. A scandal that surfaces too early may fade before it can destroy. One that erupts at the right moment can topple a dynasty. Think of the Medicis. When they wished to discredit a rival merchant family, they waited until the rival was entangled in an expensive public project. Only then did they allow news of financial mismanagement to spread. The timing ensured that creditors, customers, and allies all turned away at once, collapsing the family's fortunes overnight. In your own sphere, whether it be politics, business, or personal intrigue, you must learn to measure three things before you act. First, the temperature of public opinion. A storm must already be gathering before you direct its lightning. Second, the exhaustion of your rivals. A man fighting on many fronts will not have the strength to defend himself against a new accusation. Third, the distraction of the crowd. A scandal timed during another crisis often passes unnoticed. A scandal dropped in a lull becomes the only story. But beware. Wait too long, and you risk the shadow slipping away, redeeming himself or worse, finding a way to accuse you. That is why timing is an art, not a formula. It requires patience without paralysis, boldness without recklessness. Sometimes the perfect moment is a fleeting crack in the armor, a single remark, a small oversight, a poorly chosen ally. You must be ready to act instantly when it appears, because in the war of perception, hesitation is as fatal as miscalculation. And when the moment comes, you move not with noise, but with inevitability. The accusation must seem like a natural conclusion, not a strike from the shadows. It must look as though you had no choice but to agree with what everyone already believes. Then, when the dust settles, you stand not as the architect of destruction, but as the voice of reason that simply named the guilty. Remember, blame is not a weapon to be thrown wildly. It is an arrow drawn slowly, aimed carefully, and released only when it cannot miss. One man accused is easy to destroy. A dozen accused and the truth drowns in the noise. If you stand alone under suspicion, every eye focuses on you. If you stand among many, suspicion scatters like arrows against a shield wall. This is the art of innocence through excess guilt. You do not defend yourself directly. You make it impossible for anyone to isolate you as the villain. You create a field of confusion so wide that the crowd no longer knows where to aim its judgment. Consider the intrigues of Renaissance Florence. When factions accused one another of corruption, the shrewdest leaders never stood in solitude. They ensured that their rivals, allies, and even neutrals were entangled in overlapping schemes. If one crime came to light, it implicated so many that no single head could be chosen for the chopping block. The same principle exists in the animal kingdom. A lone antelope is easy prey. But within a stampede, even the most watchful predator cannot decide which target to chase. In politics, you must become part of the stampede, visible but uncatchable. How do you create this shield? First, through mutual entanglement. You involve others in decisions, even minor ones, so that responsibility becomes shared. When a choice is made in council rather than alone, guilt becomes a fog that covers the entire room. Second, through strategic empowerment. Give others a measure of authority over actions you already control. If a plan fails, the decision will appear collective. And the collective is a beast without a throat to cut. History offers a perfect example in the Byzantine court. When Emperor Justinian faced backlash for unpopular tax reforms, the edicts were issued under the signatures of multiple ministers. The result? No single minister could be sacrificed without implicating the rest. The blame dissolved into the bureaucracy, and the emperor's position remained untouched. This is not merely about survival. It is about shaping the battlefield of perception. Psychology tells us that when there are too many suspects, the human mind struggles to assign certainty. This is known as diffusion of responsibility. The mob demands a clear villain, but when presented with 10 possible culprits, it hesitates, debates, and often does nothing. Inaction is your shield. Yet you must play this game with subtlety. If you are seen deliberately spreading guilt, you will unite your enemies against you. Instead, let your role in the web appear natural. Speak as if you trust others. Share credit generously. Invite them to help in matters that carry unseen risks. Remember, the goal is not to exonerate yourself in their eyes, but to make your guilt indistinguishable from theirs. Even outside the halls of power, the same tactics apply. In the corporate world, a failed project rarely destroys a leader who ensured every department had a hand in it. In family politics, a bad decision rarely falls solely on the sibling who made sure everyone gave their approval first. The genius lies in making involvement seem like honor, not burden. People rarely refuse the chance to be part of something they believe will succeed, and when it fails, they will cling to the idea that they were only following the group's wisdom. There is also the art of layered narratives. If an accusation comes, have multiple alternative stories ready, each plausible, each pointing in a different direction. Not all of them must be true. Their purpose is not accuracy, but confusion. The Borgias understood this. When a poisoning was suspected, half a dozen motives and suspects would appear overnight. Friends blamed enemies, enemies blamed allies, and the real instigator, often the very person stirring the rumors, watched as the chaos buried the truth. Ask yourself, if you were accused tomorrow, how many people would be willing to stand with you not out of loyalty, but because they must protect themselves? This is why the wise ruler invests as much in cultivating shared vulnerability as he does in building alliances. An ally may betray you when it suits them, but a man bound to you by mutual guilt will defend you to the last breath, not out of love, but out of self-preservation. Do not mistake this for morality. It is survival, and survival has no sentiment. When the storm of blame strikes, let it strike everywhere at once. Let it scatter so wildly that no single figure can be brought down without collapsing the entire structure. Then, While the crowd argues over who is truly guilty, you will be free to strengthen your position in the shadows. The most dangerous hand is the one no one sees. A man may be feared, a man may be loved, but the man no one suspects, he rules without resistance. Blame, shifting reaches its highest art not when you accuse others, but when others accuse themselves or each other, without your voice ever being heard. You must become invisible, not absent, present, but unremarkable in the eyes of suspicion. Think of Talleyrand, the French diplomat who served kings, emperors, and republics alike. Through revolutions and purges, he survived every regime change. Why? Because while others shouted, argued, and claimed credit, he appeared merely to observe. In reality, he set the pieces in motion, subtle words here, a raised eyebrow there, until those around him turned against one another. When the dust cleared, he stood untouched, as if he had played no part. This is the silent hand. The first rule: never appear as the origin. If a rumor must spread, it should begin far from you, through intermediaries, careless confidence, or even your enemies themselves. Let them believe they are acting independently, while you are the architect of their discoveries. The second rule: control without commands. Direct orders leave a trail. Suggestions, questions, and casual remarks do not. Instead of saying, "He is guilty," you say, "It's strange how often he was nearby when trouble happened, isn't it?" The seed is planted, and others will water it for you. Psychology calls this planting salience, making certain details more memorable so the mind connects them later without realizing who placed them there. The third rule: be the reluctant participant. When blame begins to settle on your target, act surprised, even concerned. Offer to help them, clear their name, while quietly doing nothing to stop the tide. Your public posture of neutrality will become your shield, even as you profit from their downfall. History offers a chilling example in the fall of Admiral Byng. When the British fleet failed in the 7 Years' War, powerful men had already decided he would be the scapegoat. Yet none appeared eager to accuse him directly. Instead, they let Parliament, the press, and the public form the conclusion naturally. By the time his trial began, his guilt was a foregone conclusion, though few could trace the origin of the story. Ask yourself, how often have you seen someone destroyed without a clear enemy? That is the silent hand at work. To master this, you must also cultivate a reputation for disinterest in petty conflicts. If you are known as someone who rarely takes sides, no one will imagine you as the one orchestrating them. And yet, in truth, you will be the hidden conductor of every discordant note. The greatest advantage of invisibility is longevity. An open manipulator eventually attracts resistance, a silent one accumulates power in plain sight. But invisibility does not mean passivity. You must still place your pieces, gently, precisely, and always in advance. A look given at the right moment, a seemingly innocent question, a reminder of some forgotten grievance. Each is a thread, woven into a web that you alone can see. This is how you turn allies against one another without ever lifting a sword. When their trust fractures, the noise of their quarrels covers your movements. While they bleed each other, you grow stronger. Yet there is a danger. If you are too quiet, your influence may vanish entirely. You must leave traces, not of guilt, but of usefulness. You must remain the person everyone consults, trusts, or seeks approval from, so that your position at the center of the web never comes into question. The silent hand is not about hiding in shadows forever. It is about directing the shadows so they fall on everyone but you. Think again of the court intrigues in Versailles. The cleverest courtiers never shouted the loudest. They were the ones sipping wine in the corner, listening more than speaking, smiling at all, promising nothing. And yet a week later, the king's opinion had shifted, alliances had fractured, and the seeds of downfall were already sprouting, always in someone else's garden. This is how you endure when others fall. Your enemies burn brightly and are consumed. Your rivals play loudly and are silenced. You remain quiet, calculating, and unseen. And when the crisis ends, the survivors will thank you for your counsel, never realizing you shaped the disaster that claimed the rest. In the final truth, it is not the loudest voice that commands the stage of power. It is the quiet voice no one remembers hearing. And yet, somehow, it speaks through everyone else. The highest form of control is the one unseen, when people believe they act freely, yet move exactly where you wish. Your power is absolute. You do not force. You guide. You do not shout. You whisper. And in time, they will defend your interests as if they were their own. This is the silent empire, the dominion of perception, influence, and timing. A kingdom without walls, yet impossible to breach. Ask yourself, how many already move to your rhythm without knowing it? How many speak your thoughts, thinking them their own? Those who master this art leave no fingerprints, no trail, no confession, only results. If you understand this, you are already dangerous. If you apply it, you are unstoppable. Now, I want to hear from you. Comment your thoughts. How would you use the silent hand? Subscribe if you seek more Machiavellian strategies for power and survival. And share this video so others may learn, or so they may never suspect.